Severe weather may make a return to the state of Indiana on Wednesday evening. I am Ryan, and this is Indiana Storm Chasing Network. Feel free to hit the like button and subscribe if you have not done so already. We're going to do content like this for all severe events for the state of Indiana, so feel free to follow along. We got you covered here in the state of Indiana. So, what are we worried about? So, this stems from a slight risk in effect from the Storm Prediction Center for the western half of Indiana in yellow. In dark green, that is your lowest risk, level 1 out of scale of 5. So a low-end risk exists on the east side of Michigan. And that extends from western Ohio down through about Tennessee, further south as well, through Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, parts of southwest Michigan. But also, the entire state of Indiana is included in some sort of severe weather risk for Wednesday. The highest, though, in yellow. Why is it highest in yellow? Let's go ahead and dive into all the ingredients we need for severe weather. So starting with the composite reflectivity, basically future radar. We're going to run through this and go hour by hour here based on today's models. Now, this could change by a few hours either way. Take it as a grain of salt, or take it with a grain of salt here. Models can and do change when we're 2 or 3 days out from an event. But generally speaking, this should be fairly accurate, if that makes sense, but just don't lock it in exact, so to speak. All right, so moving into Wednesday, we're going to start seeing a system develop and move toward our direction here. And by Wednesday afternoon, this is 3 p.m. Eastern time, we see a band of storms that develops across portions of Illinois. That will race off to the east-northeast through the afternoon on Wednesday, arriving in Indiana, according to this model, at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And as it does so, notice how these storms are isolated in nature. They're not of line, but they're more so isolated by themselves. That could spell trouble here, and I'll tell you why in just a second. So, 6 o'clock, here's 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock finally congeals into more of a line segment. By we get to 10 o'clock here, 11 o'clock, and by about midnight, it clears the state. We're left over with perhaps some snowflakes for our Thursday morning time frame. So 6 p.m. to about 10 p.m. or so, main time frames to watch for some strong to severe storms Wednesday evening. But why are we concerned about this? Let's break it down. So for severe weather, we look for 4 main ingredients. We call it the SLIM. S stands for wind shear or shear. The L is lift, a source to get the storms up in the atmosphere and sustain their updrafts. Instability, to fuel the thunderstorms, and moisture as well to fuel these storms. Let's go ahead and take it one by one here. So shear, what does our wind shear look like? Let's go ahead and back this up here. As storms arrive in the state of Indiana, let's go ahead and flip over here to our shear parameter. Notice we have a very highly sheared environment across the state of Indiana, up into South Michigan, over to West Ohio, down through the Kentucky and Tennessee Valley areas. Those storms are right here on radar. They're in a very highly sheared environment here. Wind shear is not going to be an issue for us on Wednesday evening. The main thing we're going to watch here is our surface instability, the storm fuel. Models currently show right around 500 joules of CAPE, which is on the weaker side. Sometimes in summertime we can get 4,000 or 5,000 joules, but in springtime with these highly sheared environments, it doesn't take a lot of shear to get severe weather. So even 500 joules, it's a low-end amount, yes, but we could see some severe weather out of that as these storms push eastwards. So shear, check. Instability, check. On the weaker side, but still check. What about moisture? Let's look at moisture really quickly here. Our dew points, we want to look for like the mid 50s or higher here. We're seeing that kind of borderline according to the NAM model here. We're seeing 54s, perhaps 52 in spots. So moisture is not overly abundant, but we could also see these models being underdoing these moistures just a bit. Underdoing the dew points just a bit here. We'll have to keep an eye on that. If we trend with more moisture, could be looking at a more significant threat here across the state of Indiana. So that is your moisture. With that lift mechanism, we have a source of lift here with that low pressure system in close proximity. We have the center of the low is right here. I'll go ahead and mark it for you, right about here. And that's going to push and provide lift for these storms to get up and going. So all 4 ingredients are there for severe weather. So hazards, number 1, because of the wind shear, damaging straight line winds. But because these storms are isolated in nature, according to the model, that does draw some concern for perhaps a brief tornado or two possible, as when we have these line segments, it's a little bit harder to get tornadoes to form. When they're more individual like that, we can see some tornadic activity with these storms. So we're going to keep a close eye on those as a first tornadoes enter the western part of Indiana, where that threat is the highest currently in yellow. But then as they move eastward, that threat for tornadoes should die off as they congeal into a line, just because linear segments have a harder time producing tornadoes. Not always, but in this case, we'll have a harder time producing tornadoes. So the risk for tornadoes currently looks to be highest in the western part of Indiana. Stay tuned for any changes, if any, do occur between now and the Wednesday evening time frame. Last but not least, hail would be the third threat there, and especially as they are more so isolated in nature. Because we don't have an abundance of instability, the hail is going to be kind of probably pea to dime size. I don't expect there to be any large hail per se with this system, but I do think there is a low threat for severe hail, quarter size or larger, especially if storms can remain by themselves or isolated in nature. Once they go into a line, or if they go into a line early, that threat for hail would die off pretty quickly. So I do think the SPC is a well-placed level 2 out of a scale of 5, slight risk there in yellow. I do think that's very well placed from the SPC currently based on model guidance. Wind, number 1 hazard, tornadoes, number 2, and then hail, number 3. Main time frame Wednesday around 5 p.m. at the earliest to about midnight or so at the very latest. So that is your forecast. That is what you can expect for Wednesday. We'll go live here at ISC on YouTube and Facebook for a briefing tomorrow afternoon or evening. Stay tuned for changes. We got you guys covered. With that being said, we'll also be live in the event of any severe weather in the state of Indiana come Wednesday evening. So stay tuned to the page. We got you guys covered.